Welcome back to another episode of the Be Who You Came to Be podcast. I'm your host, as you know, Tara Renze, and I am so excited about today's guest. This is someone that I have known for a long time and admired for a long time. Seth is a visionary speaker, a thought leader, and a champion of what it truly means to be extremely human in this AI world that we're living in. Seth Madison is here with me today, and if you've ever felt tension between performance and your purpose, or wondered how to lead with more impact, more heart, more love, more you are going to absolutely dive in deep to this conversation. Seth and I are going to dive into a topic that's both near and dear to both of our hearts, kind of an abstract one. That is love. And not just love as an emotion, but love is an energy, a strategy, the one thing that AI can never replace or replicate. And what we each love is so different. So if you've read anything about Seth, you're going to get to hear the story of his grandmother's love, which is interesting because my story came out of my grandmother's love that came in the form of a note. The Be Who You Came to Be letters was signed, Be Who You Came to Be, Love Will Guide You. Because here's the truth. In a world that's getting faster, louder, and more automated, the people who are winning, the leaders who are winning, are all the ones who remember what it means to be fully human and lead with love. Seth, welcome to the show.
Tara, thank you for having me, and what a beautiful tee up. And I love our connection with the impact that our grandmothers have had on our lives and on our content and this incredible IP we're bringing to the world. So I can't wait to dive into it.
Yeah. So I want to take the listeners back because when I met Seth Madison, Seth was this larger than life, huge arena type keynote speaker who had, the energy that he brought, that he still brings. But he was like, I remember watching him, I'm like, oh my God, he just jumped up on this table, just the passion and excitement. And then he had the shift, and he still brings all the same energy, but it's just a different spin on it. And he's talking about love, which I want you to just share kind of the evolution of what's happened and how you are riding this big wave that truly is what matters most in all of what we do in life, which is love.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the tee up. So I'll give the Cliff Note version. It's not a 3-act; it's a 4-act play. Act one. I grew up on a 4th-generation farm in southern Minnesota. So father, grandfather, great grandfather, all on the property at the same time. And two big lessons that were sort of ingrained in me at that time. One was this idea that, when you grow up in an agricultural environment, a farming background, you learn how to surrender the outcome. Like, there's so much that operates outside of your control. You can run a flawless operation. You can be up every morning at 4:30 a.m. and do all of the things. And if you get an early frost or a hailstorm in August, and it takes the crops out, it's outside of your control. Mm-hmm. And so you learn how to operate in a hyper dynamic, a lot of change. Everything's always changing in that world. People think ag is static. It's not. Everything's changing. Seasons are changing, markets changing, technology's changing, et cetera. And so you learn how to tolerate that ambiguity. That was one. Two, my father, I jokingly say, he had this weird obsession and love affair with hard work. It's just he loved, if it was 110 and we'd be baling hay, he'd be like, isn't this awesome?
Oh my God.
No.
I grew up on a small town too, and my grandfather used to say, this was a compliment. I'm going to tell you something about this guy. He's not afraid of hard work. For him too, that hard work, it was something to be celebrated.
Yeah, it was a badge of honor, right? And
yeah.
I of course I rolled my eyes as a kid, but it did embed a bit of a toughness in me, which has served me well as an entrepreneur. And so in that environment, one of the things I saw though was I intimately understood this idea of different generations, generational stories, and how each generation sort of has a unique view of the world. And it sort of planted a seed in my mind. So into Act 2, I graduate university, I go into management consulting, and we did culture change, leadership development work. But because of that generational background, I saw the world through that lens, and I saw our clients struggling with these new generational shifts. Now, this is the mid-2000s, 2005, 6 time frame. The idea of millennials and Gen Y was brand new. And so I was very lucky in that, I had that background and I caught and saw a trend that was unfolding. I started studying the topic, looking, learning, and which leads into Act 3. Turns out, and sort of as fate would have it, there were 2 best-selling authors in Minneapolis, where I was based, who exclusively focused on the theme of generational dynamics. They had written a bestseller in 2003 called When Generations Collide. I knew someone who knew someone who knew them, introduced, and I basically begged, borrowed, and stealed to like get an opportunity to essentially apprentice for them. And it worked out for us to come together. And I essentially was able to join two world-class speakers and authors, which sort of launched me into this world of building a thought leadership practice, because it's a pretty obscure space. Now, the challenge was this was right at the wake of the Great Recession. And so their business collapses, the speaking industry collapses. They basically, they can't pay me. I'm donating blood and like doing side jobs to like find a way to keep it going. And like we made it through the valley of darkness and came out the other side. And I had 4 remarkable years tutoring under them. And it was beautiful because they were both so different. They were Lynn Lancaster and David Stillman. They had totally different approaches to their stagecraft, how they showed up in the world. And I just got to like work and watch 2 masters at their craft. And I picked from both of them, and I sort of worked to discover and find my own voice. They sold that business, and it created an opportunity for me to launch on my own. And so in 2013, I launched under my own banner. I had a non-compete in place with the people who bought it, which meant I couldn't only talk about generational shifts. And so it was sort of forced innovation and evolution. I had a thought that, in studying youth, what that really does is it gives us clues about the future. And so
Right.
that what I was really doing in studying generational shifts was I was studying the future of work and the future of leadership. And that frame was a beautiful frame to sort of direct my research. 2013, that was an early framing and branding topic, and I caught a wave. For the next 6 years, 7 years, the future of work was an unfolding of like what's around the corner. And we had a great rocket ship of year-over-year growth, and then COVID hit. You sort of
Oh,
alluded to that.
yeah.
And my business went to zero, like a lot of people, because all of our work, our value prop was in-person delivery and
Right.
consulting. And you made the reference of like, I had developed a pretty big style of delivery, high energy, standing on chairs and jumping on tables. But the truth is, some of that was overcompensating for insecurity in my thought leadership, my IP, my ideas. My thought was, if I could just overwhelm people with my enthusiasm and energy, and I don't pause long enough for them to actually stop and be like, what did he say? And question, that I could just bring them along. And COVID, when we had to step in front of the camera and be in these small spaces, it really forced me to find a new evolution of my content, my voice, and how we served clients. And it also gave me a chance to look at our work. And so that leads to chapter 4, our 4th act, and that'll kind of lead into our conversation of thinking about, if this is the last thing I get to talk about, if this is the subject and content, if this is who I came here to be, like, what am I saying? What really matters? And it really made me interrogate, instead of just talking about future of work trends, I started to excavate stories that were at the core, part of who I am. And it took me back to my roots of the farm. And it took me back to my grandmother. And it took me back to love.
Yeah.
And I started a journey of exploring where love, and you gave the right frame, and I think we should explore it. We're not talking about love as the emotion of connection when I say love. And there's anything wrong with that. It's a beautiful expression of love. But what I'm specifically exploring is the idea of love as the energy of creation. And when that is in things, in our products, in our services, in our experiences that we create for people, when that goes into those things, what happens? What happens to us and what happens in the marketplace?
Right. Well, first off, I have to tell you that I never sensed that when you were larger than life, and it would never seem like you were overcompensating, just from a
Thank
viewer.
you.
And I'd seen you speak, I'd watched all of your videos, but I think that's a good just lesson for our viewers to know that, like, I think so many times they see people in our space and they think, oh, they've got it. They never have imposter syndrome, or they're never
Totally.
challenging what they're saying, or they don't overthink things. And I mean, we do like that. I think that's how we got to where we're at, right? Is like, we
Totally.
don't ever just wing it. Like, we have been working on it for years to be who we came to be, which is this evolution of our messages. And it's so interesting how the message does continue to grow and evolve. And if you think about, landing on this idea of love as an energy and a strategy, like this has been built by everything that you have been doing for the last 20 years. So
Yeah,
let's dig into this. So I think it is interesting. A lot of people, when we hear the word love, we automatically think a connection between two people,
totally.
where really, it was my grandmother at my rehearsal dinner. She got up and gave a toast, the same one who wrote the Be Who You Came to Be note. She said, "Love is why we're all here."
Mm.
And I thought that was just such a beautiful toast to give, because it is true. Like, love is why we're all here, for interpersonal connections. But love is also why we choose work, why we do what we do. I'm mentoring and talking with my oldest son right now. Like, what do you want to do? What do you love? Like, what do you want to focus on? And it really comes back to those personal interests and where he would want to pour his heart and time into to college for the next 4 years. And then obviously, we're trying to get him to think about the rest of his life too. But when we're talking about love as not a sentiment, but as an energy or strategy, what does that mean in the business world? And how are you positioning this message?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll tell you, just like the genesis of that inspiration. We talked about our grandmothers, and for me, it was born out of reflecting on how she showed up, how she approached life and her craft. The way I describe her to folks is, she was the kind of person that liked to show others she loved them through food.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know people like that. Your listeners right now, you probably can picture them and the thing that their specialty that they made. And that was her. You came around and like, she had to feed you. And I got to experience that a lot growing up because we lived on that same property. And, when I started my firm Futurist Labs and we were studying high performing brands and teams, one of the questions I always kept coming back to was like, why did everything always taste better in my grandmother's kitchen? Like, we keep exploring these incredible brands and like what they get right. But I'm like, what did she do? Like, why was it better? And I felt like it was this combination of her love of baking and cooking mixed with her love of other people. And that combination meant you could taste the love. And I remember having the thought with the team of like, well, if you can taste love in food, I wonder if you can see love in products and services and experiences out in the world. And of course, everybody who's tuned in right now can probably reflect on a product, a service, their favorite brand that like you can taste, you can see when love is in a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of like, when things are made with love, it becomes the ultimate X factor. And so what happened was you had this combination of me deeply evaluating the idea of what happens when things are made with love, when we put love into things, while we simultaneously had this rise in the expansion of artificial intelligence. ChatGPT comes live in November of 2022, January, spring of 2023, like these ideas start to merge. And in my mind, I have this vision of like, for us as humans, as we're trying to maintain our relevance and our value in them, because we're all wondering like, am I going to have a role? Like,
Mm-hmm.
will I still have a place in all of this, or am I going to be disrupted? Will I be rendered irrelevant? And sort of landing on the idea that I think the human strategy that wins the future is to put our love to work, because everything that isn't made with love, and I do believe this, Tara, everything that isn't made with love will be undervalued, underappreciated, and commoditized,
Mm-hmm.
because technology will take it, right? Technology, it will render it a total commodity. And so the only differentiation then becomes your ability to leave. And when we say put love, your passion, your joy, your history, your legacy, your vision, all of that goes into the thing. I'll sort of end with this of like, I say to people all the time of like, it is to leave a part of yourself in the work. And so
Right.
my prompt for like our listeners right now is like, just sort of reflect to yourself of like, when was the last time you left a part of yourself in something that mattered?
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
when I went there, that in the work, like it really became a personal exploration for myself of like, when's the last time I made something with love? When's the last time
Mm-hmm.
I left a part of myself in something? And the second I started to approach the work like that, like the energetic signature on that work has just reverberated in ways that I could have never expected.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you set out with this new mission of love as an energy and a strategy, obviously I loved it so much because of my mission, which was the note that my grandmother left my son, almost 2 decades ago, of be who you came to be. Love will guide you, and it's really interesting because everyone knows the "be who you came to be" message. They immediately kind of pause and think about themselves differently and like, who am I and what did I do? But I do feel like one of the things that I have not done a good job of is really backing that up with how to do that, which she said, love will guide you. And I just, you think about love, and I'm curious to know from your standpoint how you're positioning this so that it's smart and not soft. And I know that we're in a moment right now. I feel like
Yeah.
with what we do as speakers, because
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
before the pandemic, even I was sometimes told, well, this message seems a little soft. It seems a little, we really want tactical strategies and really specific things on customer service issues and driving sales. And now I'll get someone will have an inquiry for a gig for me. And I'm like, I'll see who it is. I'm like, why me? Like, I kind of start
Yeah.
thinking, like, I start questioning
Yeah.
it. And then I talk to them and they're like, we want to make our people better humans. We want them to bring their whole self to work. We want them to bring their authentic gifts and talents into this business because we know that if we can get the best version of them and them showing up, believing that they have what it takes to make an impact, then we can innovate. Then we can,
Totally.
work on everything else. But I'm curious to know about you and this, like, have you been told like love, like have people thought love? Like, wait, how are you going to position this?
Yeah, yeah. So like that question of like, is it too soft? Is it too woo? The reality is, there are 100% certain companies, certain brands, certain people that this is for, and some that aren't. What's interesting is when you put a stake in the ground around an idea and a concept like this, and you stand on your belief in a really passionate and convicted way, people come forward. You create an opportunity for people to come forward and say, I believe what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want to stake our future on as well, because we see the writing on the wall. It's not that we don't want to be tech forward and leverage technology, but what a lot of my clients are saying is that they're like, we know that's not where we're going to win. That's like the table stakes. Like you
Right.
have to have that in place. Where we know we can differentiate is over here on this other side. Use that frame of extremely human. We say to people all the time as we look to the future, it's like there's going to be two winners, either the extremely fast or the extremely human. When we say extremely fast, the extremely fast, these are your Amazons, your McDonald's, your Sheins, S of the world, right? They're brands that have said, we're going to leverage technology to remove as much friction from the process as possible. There may or may not be a human involved. It doesn't necessarily matter. McDonald's is a good example for those of you we don't have to shame each other as to whether or not you like
Right.
McDonald's, but like, do you care if you go to McDonald's when you're having a craving, whether you order with a person or whether you type your order into a kiosk? You don't
Right.
care as long as you get your order, right? That's fast. But then there are brands who are like, no, we're going to win with people, with experience, with high craft, high artisan, unique experiences. The challenge people run into, Tara, is that they try to do both. And
Mm-hmm.
almost every brand is like, well, we're trying to do. And what ends up happening is while they're in pursuit of both, they're not good at either, and they get stuck in between. And in between is the danger zone. In between is what you call the black hole of commoditized mediocrity, where
Right.
you either get disrupted by the technology or you get disrupted by someone who nails the human piece. And so back to your full question of like, is it too soft for some people? Yes, but what I'm finding is that most people now are really starting to feel the challenge and the opportunity that technology and disruption is creating, and recognizing that as individuals, as humans, we're in the same boat. You have to
Right.
find your value creation. Every single person who's tuned in right now, your job, your function, your role, if you're looking at what you're doing and you're like, geez, technology, AI right now can do half to three quarters of what I have done. Like my value is going to be called into question because the technology can do it. And I'm watching is like less and less of the work is left. And I'm wondering to myself, can I do the parts of the work that are left? Can I be great at the parts that are left? Maybe I need to reimagine what are the most human elements of what I do. And then your opportunity is to look at that and say, what would it feel like if I were to put my love to work in that piece, bring my passion, my joy, my creativity, my excellence into that part of the work so that I can remain relevant and continue to bring value to the organization. And
Right.
then,
So what let's like dig a little deep into there, there's this saying, if you love what you do, you'll never work in a day in your life. And I mean, come on. I love what I do. I still
yeah,
work my ass off, okay? I
yep,
do love working, but there's some days where I don't I really I'd like God, I would rather just go hang out at the pool, but we're committed to our craft and what we do and our business and but what about people who would say something like, "Well, I'm a janitor.
yeah,
how
100%,
how are you going to help me
100%,
bring love to that?" And
100%.
I've got
It's a
a
great
fun
prompt.
story, but it's I think there's some times where people marginalize
Yeah,
what they do,
it's a great prompt.
where it's not really about the job. I think so much of it. I love that you keep saying, human. I remind people all the time, like, you're only human. Someone feels bad about something, or like let's embrace that. Like, you're only human. Like, this is, and that's emotional experiences and all the emotions that we feel. But let's go back to,
It's a great prompt. So this is, I tell people all the time, this is not a message of go do what you love.
right.
There's nothing wrong with people who have that message, but that's not what this is. This isn't a message of go do what you love. This is a message of finding the love in the work that you do. And there's a very big difference to that, which means this is about bringing love, bringing reverence, bringing craft and artisanship to the work. It's like the love is brought to the work. It's not found in the work. I'll say that again because I want that to land for people. Like, love is brought to the work. It's not found in the work. And so to bring it to the work, well, what does that mean? Well, there's a couple of things. Like, if we really want to make our things with love, number one, the first thing we talk about is this idea of you have to make the work matter. You have to make the work matter. People have this idea of like, this vision of like, someday I'm going to like find this like rich, meaningful work. And when I do, like, then I'll bring passion and joy and reverence to the thing. No, meaning isn't found, meaning is brought. Love isn't found, love is brought. And so to the janitor, I'll give you a perfect real life story example of this. I recently flew into Detroit Airport. I'm renting a car. The rental center is off-site, so you had to take a shuttle to the rental center. Well, we've all taken the rental shuttle bus from the airport to the center before, and it's not a great experience. Usually a driver gets out, is not treated well, takes your bag and like chucks it underneath the bus. Well, in this particular case, the Enterprise truck pulls up and I step on, and for some reason, I looked over my shoulder and there was a welcome sign over the driver's seat, and it said Candyman, where his name should be. It said
Right.
Candyman. There's an elderly African-American man sitting in the seat. There's a big giant a bucket of candy sitting on the shelf. And before we take off, this man proceeds to step out from his driver's seat and put on a Motown performance, giving out candy, dance. Turns out he was a professional dance instructor. I'm telling you, Tara, between that and the drive over to the rental center, the 8 of us on that bus, laughed so hard, had so much fun. He was blasting music, got up, danced, put on a performance. My point is, he used that arena. He could just be a bus driver, or he decided to make that space his. He decided to bring reverence and craft and artisanship to the experience. He put love into the work. Now, did Enterprise tell him to do that? No, absolutely not. They didn't. He made the decision to do that. And so the truth is, a part of it is like honoring the mundane, bringing reverence to every task along the way is a part of how you put love to work. We don't wait for big moments. We know that it's found actually in the small moments.
Right.
And so the janitor can do it as well.
Yeah. There's actually a story out of Minneapolis. I've told this at a few of my workshops where we're talking about that leadership is love, is one of the emotional intelligence secrets, that, being a great leader is about loving not just what you do, but loving the people that you get to work with and getting them to succeed and win. And there's I tell the story about this janitor's name is Gregory Watson. He works at the Minnesota Children's Hospital there in Minneapolis, and he changed this one little kid's life who had been in and out of the hospital since he was little. He has he was born with a birth, just a birth, not birth defect, an ailment, like an illness that he's had since birth. And he's in and out of the hospital having like pretty painful treatments. And Gregory had always been his janitor. And, they formed this bond and this friendship with him and this little boy who was in there. And he said that, it was never his job to clean rooms. It was never his job just to show up and to clean. It was his job to create a space that felt clean and safe for his people, the patients that were in there, and to connect with them and to give them some joy and love in these times where he knows it has to be so hard. He says he's raised his own children, and he can't imagine if that's what their upbringing would have been like. But what's really cute is the story goes on, and Cooper, the little boy, didn't have to come in as much, but his mom said that they were at Target and he eyed this like janitor, like a cleaning kit, like with the mop and everything. And he was like, I have to have it. And she said he goes around the house and he cleans all the time. And he says, when I grow up, I want to be like Gregory. And I just think it's such a powerful story that, he's been in this hospital where the doctors have been saving his lives and all this medical intervention and all these people who have cared for him and his health. But what this kid remembers is the guy who was in his room that made a connection with him, made him feel seen, brought him popcorn, sat down and colored with him, and made this connection that this little boy says, that's who I want to be when I grow up. And I love that story so much because I do think it is one of those, like, it matters how you show up and what you do. And, back to McDonald's, my oldest son worked at McDonald's last summer, and it was such a great learning lesson for him of like, hey, how you show up matters. And he was working the window. So,
I love
talking to
that.
people and having fun and passing out the fries and all that. So I think
I
it's,
love that.
even for our youth, we really have to start teaching them at a young age that how they show up and what they put into the work matters more than even the work.
I totally agree. And when you do that, you inspire everyone around you to do the same,
Mhm,
right? That's
mhm.
like, it's like when you make your things with love, you inspire everyone around you to make their things with love. You can't not. Like when you're around artisans and craftspeople and people that like really care about the things that they're doing and the way they show up, attention to detail and acts of service. They're consciously aware of how they show up. You can't help but feel that yourself of like, God, again, back to like, when's the last time I made something? How am I showing up for the people around me? There's a ripple effect there without question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as you know, I'm an emotional intelligence practitioner. I think so much of this message is grounded in emotional intelligence of self-awareness, our interpersonal skills, seeing things for really what they are, being able to be empathetic, our own self-regard for what we do and where we spend our time. What role do you think emotional intelligence plays in your message of leading with love and using love as an energy and a strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hugely important, and I think you did a great job of kind of creating the frame around emotional intelligence. To me, there's a huge aspect there of just self awareness and self knowledge, to be able to sit with your emotions, to be able to articulate and identify and express. And not be not be caught off guard or go unconscious. To have a high level of awareness and consciousness because you've done the work of like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I can tell when that thing comes up. I've done enough work. I know where my trigger points are, and that doesn't mean that like sometimes I don't react, but I'm doing the work to be highly present and to be able to respond, to not get emotionally hijacked in situations. And then I know myself enough to know of like, what do I love and what are my gifts? And then that spills over into your interpersonal relationships of like, I think one of the most highly emotionally intelligent things you can do for another is to be able to just like bring your full presence to another human being,
Mm-hmm.
to like just give someone the gift of your attention. I love it when someone had said it to me, and I think about it often, in our world when we're in a big events with lots of people. Sometimes I'll feel rushed to like just say what I'm going to say real quick and give the attention back to the other person. And this person said to me, I'm like, I'm going to give you the short version. And she said, no, I want the long version.
Right.
And it's such a small thing. But when somebody holds space for you and they say, no, I don't want the short version, I want the long version. Like, I'm here for it. I want every detail. And they're curious and they ask great questions. Like when someone shines the light, the gift of their presence on you is one of the greatest feelings in the world. I know that. And so I'm super consciously aware of that when I'm the one who can give that to another. Of like, and it doesn't mean it has to be a bunch of time, but it's highly potent and highly present. And so again, back full circle to sort of your prompt around emotional intelligence, is to know yourself, and then to be able to, with that knowing, bring your full presence to be able to effectively engage with the people around you. Like, that's a superpower for leaders today.
Hey, it's Tara here, and I am so excited to let you know that the second edition of my book, Be Who You Came to Be, is officially on pre-sale. I originally self-published the book, and now a publishing house has picked up the book, and I'm so excited and so honored that this book will be available in bookstores across the country. However, you don't have to wait till it gets into the bookstore to get your copy. You can go to my website and sign up for your very own pre-sale book, which includes new secrets, new emotional intelligence takeaways to help you step into your authenticity and be exactly who it is that you came to be. Look, you don't need a self-help book to help you fix what's broken. You're not broken. You just need to become more of who you already are. It's why I poured my heart into this book, and I am so excited that a copy is waiting for you. Head over to my website now and get your copy. I've been doing a lot of speaking on the community banking circuit. I did their national conference in DC, and then I just did a local, the Kansas Community Bankers. And my family actually had a community bank, still has it for, 117 years. They've had this community bank. And one of the things that was very apparent and clear when I started really digging in more to my research before I got up on the stage and spoke was like, what differentiates community banks? And, it's love. It is love. I mean, I believe that community banks allow people in these small communities to be who they came to be. They have these financial institutions to attract people back to the communities, to start businesses, to give them loans, to have a sense of belonging, the sense of community, and to really dive into their passions and purpose. But really what differentiates community banks is they are the epicenter mecca of these small thriving towns. And any town that's thriving, I would bet, if I was in Vegas, that they have a very strong community bank. And what happens at these community banks is that's different from the city banks is people come in to bank every day. And they come in because they have the connection and they want to tell the stories, and they sit in there and, chat people up, and they know about their kids, and they're part of their milestones of whether it's their first checking account to, their first home loan. Did they help that kid get the car loan that they needed to get the car, to starting their business? And then the ups and downs of like you were talking about agriculture, and it's an ag lending bank of there's good years and bad years. But at my dad's funeral, I had this said to me by so many people. It was really interesting to me. So many people came up and said, your dad was my best friend. And it's because he led with love. And it was never about trying to, get the most loans out of people and have all their money, but it was really about understanding the role that he could play and them being who they came to be. And I think there's so many businesses out there like that. But I think that's an example of something that could be something that could be automated. Banking. I mean, for so many people, it is automated. But I do think there'll be parts of the world that, and of our country specifically, where some of that will never take over.
Well, that's a perfect example, though, again, of back to extremely fast or extremely human. For those community banks where they don't have the resources to double down on technology, where they're going to have the most intuitive, not going to be able to compete with the Wells Fargos of the world with their technology. Now, hopefully they've got some resources, of course, but they have to double down, right? They're a perfect example of that. And the story of your family and that sort of setting, it was the exact same for my family. I can still distinctly remember our small town community bank. And to this day, my dad will still say we might not have been able to keep the farm had it not been for the relationships, because there were some tough seasons. Farming in the 80s sucked. Interest
Mm-hmm.
rates through the roof, crop prices in the toilet. Like, we had to evolve the farm, take different shots, build different stuff, set up hog operations. Like, my dad had to go in, and it was based on the relationships and them having the trust and knowing him and knowing that, like, his word is his bond. This is somebody that we can bet on. If they had just typed in his financials into the algorithm, it probably would have
Right.
come back as a denial,
Yeah.
but the relationship saw him through.
Yeah. My first job actually was at the bank, obviously, because there wasn't a lot of opportunities. And I was not employable. I was like a middle schooler, but I
Sure.
shredded paper. It was highly dangerous. So I didn't work. People are always like, "Oh, you worked on a farm." I'm like, "No, I didn't, because I was the banker's daughter." But we had to shred paper, and this shredder was like this industrial. It was not safe for a 12-year-old girl to be running. But I have to tell you, I had a lot of pride. I thought back to that job. I was like, I actually had a lot of pride in that job and what it was. But you know what it was? It wasn't because shredding paper was something glamorous and I was making $2 to $3 a bag. It was because
Yeah.
I was part of the family business. I was part of something bigger than me, and therefore
Mm,
I was part of the community. And I think that was one of those things that early on in my career, thinking back to like my first job, of what I learned from it. And it always goes back to not the skills, but the lessons that we learn through the
mm.
interpersonal connections that we have and being part of something.
I love that. I love that.
So I'm curious on all these different organizations that you've worked with, organizations all over the world, and this sentiment is so beautiful, and I think it's so true. I think we can think back to any leader specifically that we would identify as the best leader that we have ever had. It was not about transactions or performance, but it truly was about, we felt cared about, we felt seen, we felt like they knew us. It was a relationship out of love and pushing us to be the best version of ourselves. But what kind of tactics are companies using to to infuse this into their mission, so that whether I am head of innovation and creating the newest, latest, and greatest, or I work in the cafeteria, or I'm in accounting, or I'm in marketing, what are they doing to help people feel like they can bring their whole selves and love to work?
Well, it's a great prompt and it's a great question. There's a lot of organizations that talk about those things. There's a lot of
Hmm.
organizations that talk about, like, creating a culture of belonging and bring your whole self.
Right.
But a lot of times it's a marketing ploy. It's just words. I'll give you an example of something really simple, but incredibly tactical and potent. We're working with a client right now in the insurance space called CNF, and they have an incredible history. Like, they go back all the way to the 1840s. Like, if anybody ever saw Gangs of New York and like the firefighting scene where the firefighting brigades like show up and they're fighting over who's going to put the fire out, like, it was born out of fire insurance in New York City. So they've been around forever. Their CEO is the epitome of a human-centered leader. They have an internal initiative called Belonging at CF. And one of the simple things that they do to foster connection, having people show up fully as themselves, is they have brought back what I would call like a 1970s and 80s party culture. And what I
Okay.
mean by that, when I say party culture, like, I think, we went through this era of like so much sensitivity around, like, oh, no alcohol and you can't put people around, and like there's just
Right.
HR issues everywhere. And they have sort of come back to the center of, like, no, people need human connection. And
Right.
so specifically what it looks like is, like, every other week there is a 4 o'clock happy hour party on their campus. And like, they're coming back to being mostly in person from 4 to 6. There's not a lot of structure. They used to have a ton of structure. It'd be a fireside chat and like all the, and then they just were a place of like, just put out a little food, beer and
Hmm.
wine, and like people come and just hang out. It is a hangout culture. And what has happened from that, and I'm talking to the CHRO about this, because there's just a real budget to like put these on. Not to
Right.
mention, people would be like, oh, there isn't time for that. They're like, we have a whole bunch of KPIs that all show this has been beneficial for us, particularly
Hmm.
for young people. Because guess what happens? Senior level executives come, they hang out. Young people early in their career, they're getting exposure, they're building relationships. All of a sudden, net new opportunities are coming up. They're in conversation with people. People are being inspired to start side projects and bring creative ideas forward because they just got back around each other. And
Right.
so it was such an aha for me of like, I think sometimes we over engineer and over analyze like what has to happen to create connection and belonging versus like the power of being together, the power of community, the power of creating space for conversation. That is the
Mhm.
magic. And so I'd create a prompt for folks of like, have you gotten away from that? What would it look like if we came back to it in some small way? I asked the CHRO, like, is there ever a concern of people getting drunk? Like weird. She's like, not once.
Right.
4 to 6, it's beer and wine. Everybody is respectful. It's a part of who we are, but it starts with senior leaders. So we don't have
Right.
to over engineer it.
Yeah, it's so true. I think I had a guest on that was talking just about the loneliness epidemic that our entire country is facing, and I think so much of it really did start to stem in the pandemic when we got so isolated, and then we got in our own heads, and there was, even though we were creating in this, we were, people were talking in the digital world, and we had the different, connections that we'd have. We weren't connecting on a one-on-one human basis, which is so needed. I think as public speakers and going to all these events, we know more than anyone like how critical this is for people to be together. It's a different experience. The conversations are different. The way people interact are so different. And the companies are moving more and more back towards like, how do we get people together and just
Totally.
create like community.
And you get inspired by each other and you build things together and like we're meant to be in community.
Mhm. Mhm. When I worked in the sales world, we would do, we'd have our trips and our meetings and all this kind of stuff. And then once a year, we did some sort of service project. And it was required to go on these projects, they weren't optional. And what happened with our teams during those service projects was completely magnificent because we were there helping, working. One of them, we went to the Ninth Ward shortly after Katrina. It wasn't. It was actually a year after, and it was still a total mess. But
Wow.
just the love that was poured into the work that we did there, the bonds, the stupid conversations that we have while we were literally like laying brick and mortar for someone's house, the amount of laughter, the
Yeah.
sheer laughter. I mean, literally sweating our asses off, working so hard. But here, we were all colleagues from all over the United States. We had so much fun during those mission trips because we truly just had this connection and got to do something, again, that hard work, but for love of helping other people. And the people would come by and they'd be like, I mean, literally people who lived in the Ninth Ward come by and say thank you. Like, it's so wonderful to hear laughter down here and to see people
Yeah.
working and to help us because no one's done that.
It's
And I
beautiful.
think that that's a great way, if they don't want to have a party, like create opportunities for community service and ways that people can bond outside of the office versus where it feels like work, 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 because that's when we start to have those human connections and show up differently
Totally.
within the office and feel like we can bring our authentic selves. I mean, when people, I always ask people, I'm like, when was the last time that you felt really great? Like that you just
Mm,
felt good
mm,
about yourself,
mm.
that you felt like you had all the right things going, that you were okay, that you were safe. And they'll tell me about it and I'm like, that's because that's when you were your most authentic self. Like you got to
Totally.
be exactly who you came to be in that situation versus the fear of not feeling like you're enough or wondering if you're not making all the right moves or just not really knowing the people that you're with, which that's that safety aspect of like, hey, I know these people, I get to work with them and I've gotten to, do other things with them besides.
All of that, I totally agree. All of that in my mind, it does go back to the idea that leaders have to go first. Like
Mhm.
you can have a belonging program that gets run by HR to like try to get it initiated, or
Right.
it's like, no, you have an executive leadership team and all the leaders are willing to like be vulnerable and to show up as themselves and creating experiences and go and attend the events and be there. I mean, if there's one thing, like it'll be one of the things I think I'll be most proud of from a professional standpoint is getting to be a part of helping to build this thing that we're doing together.
Before I ask you our final question that I share with my audiences, and it's really this notion of how do you create who you came to be? How do you actually create ongoing success and happiness? And so many people just, people say, oh, I just want to be happy. I don't know how we ever got hung up on this in society of like being happy is like the pinnacle of what everyone should want with their life, because it's really just this, it's an emotion and something that happens out of every other circumstance and it's usually hard work. It's usually tenacity. It's usually, taking the time to be patient and forgiving in relationships. It's hard work, which I go back to are like all the things that we do in life that are fulfilling. And really fulfilling things are the love. It's the love that's guiding us to do to take the, not the transactional approach of life, but truly this transformational journey of doing the hard things and going all in and experiencing the pain and the ups and downs and the setbacks, that's what creates those epic moments of success, those grandiose moments of true joy and happiness in our life, because we can't just choose it. We have to create it through doing what's fulfilling and experiencing life through every lens and emotion.
Totally.
Okay, so Seth, what does be who you came to be mean to you in this season of your life right now?
I think what it means to me is to continue to do the work in remembering who I am. And what I mean by remembering who I am is like to continually peel back the layers and the defense mechanisms and the masks and the things that you thought you had to present to the world to be accepted and loved and to feel like you belong, and to get back to your core and the most authentic version of who you are. But you can't get to that if you're not willing to confront all the stuff and to sit with yourself and to build the relationship with you. It's like the most important, we talk about the importance of relationships and connection. And it's like the first and foremost, the most important one, of course, is with yourself, which is a lot of what Ryan's masterclass was actually about, your relationship with you. And from that place, then being able to decide, what do I want to create? Not because of what the world tells me I should, and not from a place, an unhealed place or a need to matter, a need to feel significant, but it's because this is my gift to share with the world. And it's the work that brings me joy and is an expression of play and expression and expansion. And if you can get back to that place and you can create from that place, I think the potency, the resonance of the things that you create, right? I talk about that idea of like an energetic signature. If love is the energy of creation, and if you put your love to work in those things and it comes from that place, it has a resonance and an energetic signature that I think reverberates out. It attracts people. It's why I think businesses that are built on that, books that are written from that place, ideas like Be Who You Came to Be, it's why they catch on, because they carry the essence, the ethos, and the spirit of that. And so we just got to do that work to get back to that place. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Did you know that I end most of my keynotes with this quote, and you've been saying so many things that have just been reminding me of this quote over and over, and like made with love and built with love and putting ourselves into our work. But I don't know if you know this, but Michelangelo, when they asked him how he carved the statue of David out of one piece of this giant piece of marble. Have you seen the statue of David? Have you been to Florence and ever
No.
seen it? It's magnificent. It's way bigger than I ever imagined. Okay, it's like this grandiose. So I should find out the exact height of it, but I didn't realize it was so big. But he said, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set it free. And it took him over 3 years to actually carve the statue. But here's what's really curious, Seth, is that when I was in Florence, I found out that this was Michelangelo's first piece of art that he ever made on his own. That was his love pouring into it versus a priest or someone wealthy commissioning him to do the art, to say, hey, we need a painting for this part of the church. I wanted to have this, and this scene from the Bible, or whatever it might be. And then, he would paint a little or sculpt a little and bring it back, and they'd say, oh, change this, do that. So he was never building it with love, right? He was working for the people, but it was never his. And, I that's by far, I think, one of his most, I think it's his most famous sculpture. People talk about it to this day. It's a huge tourist attraction. And I just, when I found out that he said, I carved until I set it free, I thought, wow. And
Mm.
that's being who we came to be, is like, we're never going to arrive or reach this point, but we just have to keep chipping away and carving at this angel that's inside of all of us, that we want to unleash the love onto the world and to our connections.
Well said, Tara. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So Seth, you have been such a dynamic, fun, awesome. I've learned so much today on the podcast. I'm sure my listeners are wondering, how do I follow him? How do I find him? I mean, everyone's going to want to book you for a keynote now. I feel like Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Like, I actually know some people over there. I'm going to be like, you guys need to get Seth to come tell this story. That's a great story.
It's a good story. Candyman.
And they would love it. And they would love it, because they hire so many young people to come into their organization. And
we need to share the story of Candyman out of Detroit. Yeah. So if folks are curious, would love to connect. I'm easy to find. It's just at Seth Madison, Mattison, across all social channels. Probably most active Instagram, LinkedIn, and let's keep the conversation going. And go put your love to work. The world needs your love. So answer the call.
Yeah. Well, Seth, thanks so much for being on the show. Go give Seth a follow. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you liked it, we are asking you to give it a like, give it a share it with someone within your organization. Hopefully it'll inspire you to lead with love, to pour love into what you do, and to be who you came to be. Until we meet again, keep shining, live unapologetically authentic, and we'll meet again soon.